Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on what time of the day you'll be watching this podcast. Let me welcome you. Let me give you a very, very big warm welcome back to the Mike from Newlands show. It's 2024. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas, those that celebrate Christmas, and then those that just took a break and with family and celebrated New Year. I hope all went well and you all looked after yourself and kept safe. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the Mike from Newlands show, and it's 2024. And I've got a special guest. And once again, I'm going to get flack because all my guests are special. But this is an extra special guest. And I'll tell you why I'm very excited about having this guest on the show. And I'm going to explain that by talking about first something that I want to discuss and just bring to your attention. But I think first and foremost, let me actually officially welcome Matthew Parks to the Mike from Newlands show. Matthew, a very, very big, warm welcome. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm going to shower praise on you a bit more as well, a little bit later, because you deserve it. And I'll tell you why a little bit later. But first, let me just tell you that Matthew Parks is the acting national spokesperson and parliamentary coordinator for Cosatu. I'm also going to ask him why he's acting. I watched him on TV many times. He seems very proficient to me, concise and precise. So why is acting? Hopefully he'll explain that, because it seems to be a long time he's carried that title. But I also want to just say something, and I've commented on this before, dear viewers, is that for me to be sitting here in the studio with Matthew Parks is actually quite a feat. For somebody who was born in 1950, apartheid, I think, kicked off in 1948. So I went through the entire apartheid period with censorship that was absolutely extreme, no TV whatsoever, certainly no media, and with a press that was strictly controlled by the then National Party government. So I can't tell you, every time that I sit in front of this microphone and in this studio, how grateful I am, how happy I am, because the battle that the ANC fought, and many others, to get me into this studio, I truly appreciate. And that's one of the reasons I'm going to ask you, please, to press the like button and subscribe, but not just because of me or because of the Mike from Newlands show or because you enjoy watching Cape Conscious Media. It's because that I feel that every show on this medium, every podcast you watch must be supported. And I'll tell you why I say that. And I'm going to raise it with our guest a little bit later, just under general topics. But we have a bill coming up soon. It's going to be discussed in Parliament. As a matter of fact, it's due to be discussed, and as the blurb here says, at breakneck speed. This bill is becoming, and hopefully, well, the government, I think the ANC is hopefully going to have this bill through before Parliament dissolves in 2024. I guess that's when we have the election. And the bill is called the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill, better known as the Spy Bill. I'm not going to bore you with all the provisions of the bill and what it plans to do. But in a nutshell, it sounds like something that I would used to read about under the apartheid government, under the old national government. The ANC, in my opinion, is slowly but surely trying to eradicate freedom of speech. And there's talk in the powers that be that they're going to look for ways to censor the internet. They're going to use excuses like pornography, child pornography, all these things we can't obviously defend, and nor would we want to. But that's the excuse that will require us to send our shows into some sort of a censorship board. Again, once again, apartheid-style business. And then that board would then, for a fee, would look at the show and say, yep, yeah, all right, Mike from Newlands show's okay there, no problem at all. Matthew Parks came across very well, didn't say anything we didn't like. Fine, send it back, and we'll do it. Now the question comes then, how are they going to do all these shows? Well, they're not going to be able to monitor all the shows, and the laws are going to be broken, because people are just going to go ahead and do their podcasts. But the problem comes in, is if you do a podcast they don't like and they go for you, then they will concentrate on your particular podcast, put you in jail, and then that will set the fear of God into all the other podcasters that have enjoyed the freedom of speech, and they suddenly will start self-censoring. And slowly but surely, the freedom of the media will be dissolved. So I wanted to just bring that to your attention, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like you to take the trouble to have a look at this bill that's coming up. If you're a podcast viewer or a podcaster, take a look at this bill. Maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm not, I don't know. But I do know for one thing, we need to guard viciously, and viciously the wrong word, we need to guard and guard well our right to say what we can say. This is the only country in Africa where we can say what we like, we can debate with people who we choose to debate with, and nobody's going to control what we say. So, hit that like button, please, ladies and gentlemen. There's another reason that I also want to just quickly touch on it, and we're going to talk to Matthew about this as well, is that people have referred me back on this particular bill, and one of the commentators I spoke with said, yes, but Mike, you're being a little unfair. There's going to be there a watchdog. I forget that it's going to be the parliamentary something or other, the Inspector General of Intelligence, that's right. He'll be the watchdog. Now, let's just keep one thing in mind. The watchdog will be employed by the ANC government, who will in fact pay his salary. He's therefore going to report to the ANC government, and like the NPA, like the Hawks, like SAPS, like SIU, they all ultimately report to the government of the day, and that's the ANC. And the ultimate boss is the president of the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa. So not in a million years will we be able to expect any balanced opinion nor balanced judgment from any toothless Inspector General that might be appointed to monitor this. And then finally, we could approach Parliament. Well, Parliament, as I've said before on this show, has just become nothing more than a joke. I'm hoping that our guest Matthew will take me up on this, because I won't deny the fact I'm extremely disappointed with Parliament. I mentioned to Matthew earlier that my wife worked in Parliament for 21 years. And I've watched Parliament go from the old National Party into the ANC. I've taken part, or I've been a guest in debates in both those old and new houses. Particularly when Nelson Mandela was speaking in Parliament, I was very often there. And it's just shocking how Parliament has now become, in the eyes of most people, and surveys done, people do not respect Parliament any longer. They don't respect the people in Parliament. They see it more as a form of entertainment. And I mean, I've got a list here as long as my arm of people who just ignore Parliament. To give you an idea of people who just don't pitch. Jeff Gedebe never pitched, Bathabeli Dlamini, Ayanda Dlodo, then Minister of Communications, Malusi Gigaba, Faith Matamba, and so the list goes on. These are people that were summoned to Parliament, either arrived late or didn't arrive at all, and when they did arrive, didn't bring the documents they want, or very much like SAA pitch up, but don't even bring the balance sheets, which we need to look at. When we did get the balance sheets for Scopa to read, they didn't make any sense. So, back to hitting that like button, please, ladies and gentlemen. This is really, in a sense, the last bastion, I believe, of press freedom. Right, having said all that, it's now my very great and pleasure to welcome Matthew Parks, Cosatu, Acting National Spokesperson and Parliamentary Coordinator, to the show. Matthew, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure, and it will be a pleasure. So, Matthew, a little bit about you. I know a lot of people are anxious to know, who is Matthew Parks. Now, I know Matthew Parks because I switch on ENCA or SABC or Fox, the other news crowd, and there's Matthew Parks. Matthew Parks is always on the ball. He's concise, precise, and he understands the legislation. And clearly, if I understand it, you enjoy what you do because you're good at your job. My question is, how did you get into this job? What led you to it?
Sometimes I ask myself that question. Basically, I got involved in politics in the ANC, the broad ANC movement already when I was a teenager. My father had been a journalist. So he always used in that time during the apartheid era, tell me stuff, and the police, that time didn't like journalists. So they would come in and bug our telephones at home. They would break into, my father used to work from home in a garage, break into that.
I ask, what year was this?
It was in the 80s.
The 80s, yeah, indeed.
And
okay.
he'd be arrested all the time.
Yeah.
So then you would go visit the ANC in Zambia. So I guess I bit the bug. Went to UCT, and then always been involved in the ANC. the broad ANC movement. And I worked in the parliamentary sphere, basically, about almost 25 years now. National Parliament, the legislature, the city, was in the ANC regional exec for many years in Cape Town. So for better or worse, it's the
You hitched your wagon to the ANC, and quite rightly so. But a fantastic party.
And not just like because it's a political party, but it was a movement. It wasn't just the ANC, like a narrow political party, but it was the UDF, Cosatu, with all of its pros and cons. Cosatu's been interesting because at times I also became a bit frustrated. I think for me, I was frustrated by the ANC Congress in Polokwane, which I think was a turning point for the ANC, for the country, for the worse.
Say again, what was the
Polokwane conference?
The Polokwane conference.
A certain chap was elected as president of the ANC.
Yes.
Much to our cost.
Yes.
So for me, that time I had been in the legislature during the ANC and the DA's time, and then I thought Cosatu was playing a useful role in terms of kind of being, yes, as part of the alliance, that's fine, but also kind of holding the ANC government to account, which is useful because you also need to have democracy, not just in society, but inside the ANC as a ruling party. If you're to prevent abuses, corruption, mistakes, etc., etc. So,
understand that entirely. Let's just talk a little bit about the framework of the conversation, and thanks for that little bit of an intro there. Sort of feel something I understand a little bit better. So, by the way, you're an UCT, product of UCT, did you say?
Yeah, UCT and UWC.
Oh, and UWC.
So both unashamedly excellent universities.
Absolutely.
The world-class universities.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. So I wanted to discuss with you the unions. Now, a little bit of background to my life, and it's going to be I promise you, very brief, but I've been in business all my life. I traveled overseas for a while, and I came back and decided to start a company. Unfortunately, I didn't have any money, so I started as a driver, worked my way up through the company, and eventually I bought it. But along my travels, over 30 years of being in business and then selling the company, I bumped into unions. Now, as a businessman, I didn't have a problem when I trained initially in America. There was a strange, only strange now, not strange then, but the union, the man that ran the union within that particular factory of 250 employees, his office was next to the vice president of the company. And he would attend all the meetings. And I thought this was, I didn't think it was fantastic. I just thought it was quite normal, actually, because his job was to make sure that the staff stayed employed and that the company functioned. When I came to South Africa, it was just the opposite. I won't say all the unions I dealt with were bad, but I had the Laundry and Dry Cleaning Industrial Workers Union, which was run by a wonderful gentleman who I knew when we were kind of on the anti-apartheid kind of and fighting the same battle. So his name was Norman Daniels. I don't know where he is today, but it's just a wonderful man. He ran the union and we got on very well. But then Cosatu came on board and then the problem started. And what upset me was that I found that I was more like, you were not there, but they weren't, in the sense, focused on ensuring the business grew. Their attitude seemed to be more of a case of, you're the boss, you're the enemy, and we're the people, and we're going to fight you. And it became a bit of a nonsense kind of and my argument was, and I'm going to put this question, the first question I'd like to put you is, where do you see the relevance of unions now in today's business world? Because I always found, quite frankly, that my staff were generally quite happy. And they were happy because I paid the best, I had the best working conditions, and they really had good hours. And I did everything I could to make them happy because I worked on the premise that if I had happy staff and a happy environment, I would then have a productive company, which I did, by the way, for many, many years. Where do you stand now on Cosatu? I would argue we don't need unions anymore. I would say, in actual fact, times we moved on. I understood the power of the union, and it was a matter when we had apartheid, because that was the only outlet, in fact, that the ANC could legitimately use to flex their muscles. But those days are gone. The ANC is now in power, they're in parliament, and the union's function, at best, should be looking after the welfare of the person working for a company, ensuring he gets paid on time and all those good things, but not necessarily be involved in politics. Unions don't get votes. They don't stand for election. Where do you see the union. What makes the union so valuable today in your eyes, and why must we keep going with the unions as we see them today?
Yeah. So I mean, look, firstly, unions across the world are part of democracy. They're part of society interactions. So they're useful for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the unions will have difficulties. Unions are organizations, human beings. So human beings are full of flaws. So they'll bring their flaws, just like they bring flaws into the church, into political parties, into businesses, into society across the board. So unions wouldn't be exempt from those human flaws. So look, unions are useful for a variety of reasons. So one is that it's a venue to raise workers' grievances. This is a kind of a way of channeling them, because often workers will be afraid to raise a grievance with the boss, or the boss get irritated, or they dismiss them, etc. And look, unions exist because workers, many instances are really abused. You have women who go to work sexually harassed by their colleagues or by a supervisor. You have some workplaces where the manager might pickpocket money owed to the worker, and not share the tips at a restaurant, for example. Mm-hmm. You have workers in some workplaces, like the mining sector, work in really dangerous conditions. So it's critical to address those issues. So there's a variety of issues that need to be addressed in a constructive way. Because if you don't have unions, then you don't really have a channel to address workplace grievances. And then it means things are suppressed, or they boil until they explode, and then it's a disaster to everybody. Federations, so Cosatu is a federation. So you don't join Cosatu, you will join POPCR if you're a police officer, you will join NUM if you're a mine worker, etc. But they belong to Cosatu. So Cosatu, as a federation, becomes useful to society because it would be too difficult for government to go and negotiate with a plethora of unions about legislation, about economic policy, tax policy. It's more helpful to negotiate with a federation, which can kind of manage a variety of issues and contradictions, and say, look, we think we need to have a minimum wage, for example, because farm workers get paid so little they can't buy a loaf of bread, or they can't pay for transport to get to work, a restaurant worker. So become useful in that regard. Unions also become useful that so yes, it's fine to say, look, we got democracy in 94, everything is happy afterwards. Well, reality is not so clean. Cosatu, was one of the first to break with Zuma when he was president, to say, look, we think you have made serious mistakes. You've become a liability to the country. It's time you resign as president. So that became useful because Cosatu has muscle within the ANC and the alliance. The ANC was compelled to listen to Cosatu's voice to say, well, here's an avenue for civil society or society at large to say we're not happy. If you look internationally, we've looked at some useful examples we think are good role models for South Africa, whether it's in Germany or Japan or the Scandinavian countries, where you have, like you were mentioning your example, worker representation on company boards. So that becomes useful because, again, the managers, the owners of the company can hear what are workers' grievances, what can help motivate them to become more productive. Because if a worker is not motivated, a company's not going to do well.
It'll work, yeah.
Also benefits, we're engaging on legislation with business and government on it. It benefits unions also understand what exactly is the financial circumstance of the company. What can it afford? What can't it afford? So we don't want to have wage negotiation where we demand a 20% increase when it's just not possible. Maybe a 5% increase is possible. So if workers have at a shop steward level, have a better understanding what are the circumstances of the company, it can make more, conducive negotiations. It can also help workers to have a sense of ownership that, well, if the company does well, we do well. If the company doesn't do well, it's going to struggle to pay us. So it's trying to, so that kind of model is called the co-determination model or the social contract model. Also useful, I went to Denmark recently, and, they're able to negotiate a variety of things because they managed over many decades of investing in a relationship of trust between businesses and unions to the extent where they actually tell governments, don't interfere on our issues, we'll sort out between labor and business. So there's lots of issues. I'm not saying they're not issues. I think maybe the last point on this one is that I think we've collectively underestimated the amount of scars left by the party legacy that we just assumed with 94 everything switched over, and the kind of the under surface tensions are not still there. I think in many instances they are there, but by and large, it's better to have them than not to have them.
I would argue so. Maybe a little personal experience. I went out and bought. My company was now growing. I think I had 100 people. I was very pleased to employ 100 people. By the way, in fact, at one stage we had a total of nearly 180 people in this company that I owned, and I was a one-man show, by the way. But I went out and bought a new car, And it was a new Mercedes-Benz. It was my reward for 20 years of hard work, and I'd never owned a car, a new car before. And some of my staff promptly went on strike. And I had to get the shop steward came into my office and said, how can I afford to buy a new car when you guys are not paying us enough money? I couldn't try and explain, well, there's tax implications, and look, it doesn't cost me any more money. This is the way the system works. And anyway, it's my company and it's my car. And this is what I'm going to do. So they went on strike. And I said to the union guy, listen, man, this doesn't seem really fair to me. I haven't done anything. You guys have gone out on strike. Surely if they're not happy, then they're entitled to leave. I'm not forcing them to work for me, because I did know for a fact that if those guys left, I'd have a queue a mile long outside my factory in Pardon Island. But they refused to leave. The union said, no, they've got to stay and you've got to deal with the issue. Now, that doesn't sound very fair to me, and that doesn't sound like a union that's doing its job. I would have thought the union would have turned around and said to these guys, listen, that's none of your business. You're getting paid market rates, and if you're unhappy with anything, by all means tell us, and if we can't sort it out, then your next job is to find a company that can offer you this what you feel you're worth. But at this stage, this is all I can offer, and but why am I held to ransom? And why, in fact, are most big companies held to ransom on many things that they just can't offer the workers? Is that a fair statement that I'm making?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think we've got a multiplicity of challenges as a society. Remember we had that farm workers strike in the Dorans about 10 years ago. And
there was which strike was that, Matthew?
Farm workers strike.
Oh, yes, of course, I remember
in the Dorans,
Yeah.
Hex Valley, etc.
Yes.
Where farm workers are getting paid a little R6 an hour.
Yes.
I mean, that's not even enough to buy food for the day, for the family.
Correct.
So, I mean, look, I think there's a variety of chances. Some companies will do well by the workers, some companies won't do well. Some unions will do well representing the staff, some unions will go off the deep end. But it's about building a relationship. And we found the more that we engage, the better. So, for example, Edcon, before, was it 2019, was collapsing. And then we kind of worked as Cosatu with our affiliate SACTA, the Clothing Workers Union, which organizes there, and Sakao, which organizes the shops itself.
Sure.
With Edcon's management, we worked with government, the Department of Labor, the Unemployment Insurance Fund to say, look, as government, business, and labor, how can I save this company? Because there's 40,000 direct jobs, there's 100,000 indirect jobs. Because we all had a vested interests. Edcon needed to survive, so as owners, shareholders can make money. We needed Edcon to sell us products so workers could get paid to keep their jobs. Government also needed Edcon to survive so that it doesn't have to pay out unemployment payments, which cost much more, keep taxes coming in, less people are unemployed. We wanted to keep workers employed because they are members. So the point is that we all have the same interests, and we work together. Put aside our differences. There'll always be some differences. We're not the same.
Yeah.
But we have enough that in the same pot, the same ship, to keep each other going. So at times we have to compromise and kind of look, what is the bigger picture, and leave the fights of today, the irritations of today.
Yeah, look, I do appreciate that. I remember the Edcon affair very well. And I think it was relatively well handled because, there were a lot of employees that were going to lose unfairly a lot of money. But I think a lot of these things go back to an economy that we have in South Africa, which just is not growing. Yeah. But maybe that's a discussion for another time. But I want to touch on two things that you raised. Minimum wage. Now, once again, I don't have a problem with minimum wage. But I have a problem with the fact that I've got this toothpick I'm holding in my hand here. This toothpick is made in China, right? And practically anything that I find in the studio, I'm sure this is made in China. I'm sure these are made in China. Whatever it is, China. My cell phone, China. I can go on. Germany. Nothing's made here.
The rands are printed here.
Yes, the rands are printed here, indeed they are. But unfortunately are becoming worth less and less.
And I think those books are probably printed here.
And the books are printed here.
Including the paper as well.
Yes, indeed, they are. But they're not going to generate income. What I'm looking for, and a problem that I have, and one of the reasons I enjoyed employing people was giving the dignity of work. Where I differ and where I part company, and that's just my personal view, as Mike from Newlands, is where I part company with the government is the fact that there's way too much legislation involved. Now, you mentioned this minimum wage, and I know Cosatu was strongly behind that. But I want to just give you an example, and I hope it makes sense to you. But we have to import toothpicks from China. There's something unacceptable about that, and the fact we've got 40 million people, or 30 million people unemployed. I think the statistic is if you're black between the ages of 18 and 26, something along those lines, and you do not have a job now, you are never going to have a job. Now, I have a machine that you take wood and you pop it in there, you turn the handle and out pops a toothpick. I go to a little village, an area, and I say, listen, there are 10 guys. You guys want to do, unemployed, all unemployed, great. Listen, we can churn out a couple of hundred of these a day. I can probably pay you 20 rand each. And if we churn out enough, I can pay you 30. And, we can get something going. And then I'll go to 10 villages with this little machine, which they turn and they make toothpicks. And before you know it, I've got a little place, a little factory. I'm packing the toothpicks and I'm distributing them to Pick and Pay. I'm employing people. At some stage, as the entrepreneur, which is me in this case, I will then go back and I'll start increasing the price to start recovering my costs, because I paid for the machine, I paid for the truck, and I paid for the petrol. But the moment I try and do that, I'm going to have Cosatu, not necessarily Cosatu, but I'm going to have the government on my case saying, guys, you're not paying the minimum wage, we're going to shut you down. But the people that are working there are going to say, but we're happy to work for Mike. He's paying us something. We've got nothing at the moment. We've got no water. We've got no electricity. We've got no future of a job. This man has come along and we now suddenly got 20 rand, and tomorrow we might have 30. We might have 40. I have a big problem with that. And I just want to know from you, how can we overcome this? Because it can't be acceptable. And again, in my factory, I tried to import baskets. I imported baskets, were part of my packaging for the business I had from China. It annoyed me, Matthew, beyond. I see these baskets arrive, all these little really nice made kind of, what are they made out of? Bamboo. And they were once-off things, they were used once and thrown away, which I thought was out of a waste. I wasn't allowed to make them. The union said, no, you can't, because I was going to take some unemployed staff, family members, set them up in a part of the factory, and listen, guys, I'll pay you 50 rand a head. Make the baskets. Make the damn baskets. You can do that. You can keep the $50. I'll buy the. I went to the Blind Society, bought everything I needed. Nope. The union came down and shut me down. What are we going to do to overcome that? Or is that the price that we have to pay in this country for having unions? Because to my mind, there's something wholly wrong about this system. But your point, your view.
So look, I don't think we must take an approach that says that we'll solve one wrong with another wrong. Minimum wage is a relatively recent intervention in the economy. It came into effect in 2019. So for the first 25 years of democracy, there was no minimum wage. Yet unemployment was stubbornly high at about 40%. So the minimum wage is not the one which is suffocating the economy or creating unemployment. Problems about unemployment is because you have load shedding, you've got fragmenting railway networks, Transnet or PRASA. You've got ports which are just inefficient. You've got an inefficient educational system which is not having the right curriculum towards the skills we need. Crime, corruption, dysfunctional municipalities. So all of those issues. So, paying someone peanuts is not going to resolve those issues. Pickpocketing a nurse, paying her poverty wages is not going to get the trains run on time. There's also a danger that if we pay people too little, that you find that the people who have got skills that you do need will just simply move elsewhere. We're seeing that now in the public service, for example, where governments imposed wage cuts, wage freezes. What it's done is to spark a bit of a brain drain. People leave the state for the private sector, which pays better, or they leave to go overseas.
But that's a good thing, surely.
It's a terrible thing because you spend a fortune. So we're diverting a little bit. We spend a fortune educating medical students, heavily subsidized by the state because there's a societal need, especially in rural areas. The minute somebody finishes their community service, they're on a flight to London or to Dubai or to Australia.
Yes, but so the reason for that is that the government has failed to create the conditions to make it attractive enough for that person to stay. You see, we pay tax, and that man goes to varsity, and I pay for him. I pay for him to learn, spend
also,
7 years.
But because Australia, Dubai are paying better wages. So
they pay better wages, exactly. And so I would go there too. And they are going there in their droves. But that's because our government is not saying, hey, what can we do about this? Wait a minute. Our hospital conditions are absolutely lousy. The payment of the nurses is shocking. The condition, the equipment's not maintained. We've got no water. The municipality is dysfunctional. Whatever it is,
So let's
fix
deal with
it.
the issues. But my point is that blaming workers and saying, well, you get paid too much, that's not the issue. We must deal with the real obstacles to growing the economy. So look, the minimum wage came into effect because we had people getting paid 6 Rand an hour, 5 Rand an hour. Loaf of bread at that time was about 10 Rand. So we're paying people so little. In fact, we were seeing in a survey that people are getting paid so little, they're saying, well, what's the point of me going to work at a supermarket? Half my salary will go to transport. It's no longer worth it. I'm working to pay for transport. Not worth it.
Have we not skipped a step, though? I went to China. I don't know if you've been to China.
So the problem with China, though, is that we're comparing apples to oranges. China,
Well, yes and no.
everything is heavily subsidized.
Yes.
So they invest, which is,
Yes.
for China makes sense.
Yeah,
But I'm just
yeah.
saying, for us, we need to also look for the right support to give to industry to compete with China. Because China, the state will subsidize the infrastructure, the companies, etc., invest in the right skills. We're not doing that. So I think for us,
Yeah.
we need to say, how do we give support to our sectors, to industry, to compete? Not permanently,
Yes.
but long enough to
Yeah.
become competitive
Yeah.
to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah. Well, I would go back to the fact that industry to compete anywhere has got to offer primarily 2 things: a decent price, because everything's price competitive, and a good product or service. But in this case, probably a product, because we're going to export it. Now, if you take China, for example, and this toothpick, you will find that this toothpick was started in a little village somewhere in China where they were not paying a minimum wage, where they had a hotbed situation going, where there were 10 Chinese guys or 20 or 100 turning that little machine, churning them out, and they were probably getting paid in some cases $3 to $4 a day. That was it. They were supplied their food and lodgings, but appalling circumstances. I don't know if you've ever done any research into it, but literally it was a hotbed situation. One guy's sleeping, one guy's resting, and the other guy's working. But the story is now that the company that manufactures toothpicks is no longer in some small village. They built a little factory in the village, and that factory is turning them out by the millions. And here's the best part. They're getting paid extremely well. That is why China's GDP has just shot up. Because having just been to China fairly recently, I was overwhelmed. I mean, I didn't know. In fact, there's more capitalists than the capitalists. I mean, it is, but people live well. There are more Bentleys and Mercedes-Benz sold there than anywhere in the world. But why is that? It's because they had to start somewhere. Now, that village that I'm talking about that we will not allow to manufacture, and he's got nothing else to do, toothpicks, is where the problem starts. Let's let him. It's a personal choice. Surely we have freedom of choice. If he wants to work for 6 Rand because it's better than having no Rand, who are we as a government to deny him that right?
So if you want to continue to be the most unequal society in the world, that's what we're going to do. Because right now, people often assume, let's leave aside the small business. Your big companies, people assume those are private companies. They're not actually private because most shareholders are actually workers. Workers' pension funds are invested in the mining companies, the retail companies, the hotels, etc. Yet we see nothing wrong with a society where the CEOs of the big 5 banks get paid 150,000 Rand every single day of the year. Whether they work, whether they sleep in the underwear, they're getting paid 150,000 a day. Their cashiers at the banks will be lucky to get that in 2 years. But they're working every day. Same thing in the retail sector. In the mining companies, we had a strike last year or the year before where mine workers simply wanted to do horrendously difficult work. On average, every week at least one mine worker dies. Leave aside how many are injured, disabled, etc. They wanted an extra 150 Rand a month, 150 a month, basically enough to buy lunch at KFC. The CEO who made 330 million Rand in a year said, no, we can't afford it. So we need to have a bit of a better conversation which says how we can make a more equal society. It's difficult to tell that mine worker to be a little bit more, circumspect about life. Look at the bigger picture when they said the CEO is getting 330 million Rand a year. He's not the one drilling every single day. Yet it's workers' monies, which that CEO is getting his salary from. It's the pension funds. If you look at in the JSE, every single company is propped up by workers' pension funds. So we need to have a bit of a more equal side. I'm not saying everyone's going to get paid the same. That's not that utopia doesn't exist, but a bit of a better picture. So look, China does well because the state hasn't made all the mistakes we've made. They deal with corruption, they're efficient, they know what they want to do, they're disciplined, etc., etc. But also they have a heavily invested in a social wage, so housing is subsidized, transport is subsidized, education is subsidized. We're not doing that in this. We're trying to make efforts with lots of issues. The other issue also is that, so when you looked at the minimum wage, it wasn't an overnight thing. That's something that's been discussed in South Africa since the 1950s as part of the Freedom Charter in 1955. We had a lot of discussions at NEDLAC over about 2 years, where government, business and labour looked at different options. Business had in fact said they wanted a minimum wage of 11 Rand an hour. Cosatu had said, well, let's look at 25 Rand an hour. So there was a give and take, there was a compromise of a 20 Rand an hour. We then looked at, there are certain sectors which are very prone or vulnerable to automation. Agriculture, you have about, I think it's about 800,000 workers there. Key sector of the economy, the backbone of the economy with mining. Domestic workers, people can afford to go without. So very vulnerable to retrenchment. So we said, let's peg them for the first 3 years. Farm workers are pegged at 90% for the first 3 years, domestics at 75% to avoid job losses. Research was done. There's a minimum wage commission which includes reps from business, labor, and independent experts who said, let's just phase it in. Let's see those job losses. Avoid a big bang approach. And, research had been done by UCG and other independent researchers, so not by government, to say, actually, there hasn't been job losses because of it. The other thing we must look at is that we also looked at international examples from the US. We know at times apple and oranges is fine. Germany, Scandinavia, Brazil, where minimum wage had helped, one, to reduce inequality. Not that can be the only solution. You need to look at the underlying factors too, but it helps to reduce the most extreme parts of it. But also, we want to take a capitalist approach. Because we want companies to do well, to sell the products. Who's going to buy our products if workers can't afford to buy them? Who's going to buy the clothes, the shoes we manufacture, etc. if workers earn so little they can't afford to buy it? But look, the minimum wage always is going to be a bit of a plaster. The real solution is to growing the economy, to creating jobs, etc. And the key to that, how do we support local businesses? So one thing Cosatu has been quite passionate about, and our unions have been involved in, is what we call localization. So clothing worker unions are involved in their clothing and retail, clothing textile master plan with business. Saying how can we support locally produced clothes? So we managed to have engagements with the retailers, your Foshinis, etc., to increase the supply of locally produced clothes on their shelves from 40% to 60%, because that's where we're creating demand for locally produced clothes. That keeps those companies in business, that keeps those workers employed, revenues for the state. So you've got to be smart about it, because often as consumers, we're also guilty. We don't, when you go to the clothing stores, we don't check, is it made in South Africa? We just buy it quickly. And if you go to, I've been pleasantly surprised, must always be careful mentioning companies' names. Macro, a lot of locally produced clothes on the shelves.
Sure.
Good quality.
I'll buy it, yeah.
So I think for us, it's just a bit, the food we buy, just check it, Pick and Pay ShopRite, is it locally made? Even the cars, VW, etc. So we also need to play our role, because government can do so much, it can't do everything. Business can do so much, and also as consumers, where we spend our money is also key.
I hear you, Matthew. I absolutely hear you, and what you say makes sense to me. But there's a bigger picture, which I think almost this conversation, there's no time to discuss it. But all our problems, I firmly believe, would be if we had a government that wasn't as corrupt as this ANC government. You said free housing in China and medical and what, we actually have all that in this country. We have free medical, we have free housing, we have free schooling, we have free education. The only trouble is it's all rubbish. It's poorly managed. It's massively corrupt. It's just, in fact, it's just off the charts corruption. So this government is supplying us with the same benefits that China offered its staff, but unlike, as Factors Malema said the other day, if you're caught stealing in China, they shoot you. Well, they don't quite just shoot you, because the president of China said just 2 or 3 days ago, the biggest problem they have in China is corruption. They admit that they've got, but at least they admit it, and there they do deal with it. Whereas countries like Cuba, which are just beyond corrupt. So at least countries, we need to acknowledge the fact we're corrupt. But then again, that's where it comes down to the electorate to make that change at the polls. There's just a limit to what we can do. I can't do any more than I did. When I employed 180 people, eventually what I did was I went to a show in Frankfurt as an employer. I'm just, I kept saying to the unions, guys, you can't keep hammering me. I've got a business to run. I've got a customer to satisfy. If I lose that customer, we're all going to lose our jobs, including me. It seemed to make no sense. I couldn't get that through to the shop stewards. So eventually I went to Frankfurt. You buy a machine there that does the work of 10 people with one person. It was a special machine to iron sheets. You put it in one side, it folds the sheet, done in 2 seconds flat. That's not what I wanted to do, but we're forced to recognize now because we have so much resistance, and it's so difficult to employ people for us from a small company. But I hear your argument, but I just feel that at the end of the day, if I can find 7 guys in a village somewhere to manufacture this toothpick, and they all agree that they're happy to work for 10 Rand an hour for however long it takes to get their salaries up, just the way they started in China, we are doing them a disservice. That's my opinion. But that's not.
Can I just interject, Mike? There was a podcast with who's the guy from PA? Mackenzie.
Oh, yeah.
Gayton Mackenzie. And he spoke about the inequality of South Africa. He said that there's 14, there was no Afrikaner billionaires, and there's 14 now. So I don't think the problem lies with government. I think it's with big business, because I don't know if it's true though, but the fact that that we have inequality, and that the fact that we have there's more millionaires now, and the poor isn't the wealth isn't distributed equally, man. And I think he said it earlier and perfectly, but I just wanted to add that there's more. The middle class is not. There's a smaller middle class nowadays because of that, and a lot of people say the bigger the middle class, the better the country does. And I think I want to agree that it's not really a government thing. It's a business thing where the owners need to realize you need to earn less, and if the bigger your company, the more you need to shave off to the workers. That's just my humble opinion.
Yeah, if you read Whitey Bisson's book, Nantle, he was earning something like, I don't know, I forget, the figures were so big. Was it like 2 million a day or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think about 150, like 200 million a year.
Yeah, or something like that. Ridiculous amount of money.
Yet cashiers there were getting like 60,000 a year. They earned so little they couldn't qualify to pay income tax.
Correct. But you see, here's the thing about that is that's fine. He could take a cut in salary. Let's say he went down to half of his salary of 1 million Rand a day or whatever it was. He would have increased everybody's salary by about 2 or 3 or 4 Rand if you spread it over, because they've got over 16,000 employees.
Sometimes it's about symbolic gestures too.
Yeah, certainly. But at the end of the day, it's really about putting money in pockets and employing people. And where Whitey Bisson comes into the picture, in my opinion, is the fact that he's created employment out of nowhere. He's taken that company from South Africa right up through Africa. He is an employment creator. And
but
with that,
funded by workers' pension funds too.
Yes, but they get their return. They are, the pension funds,
so is he at 200 million Rand a year?
Sorry?
So is he at 200 million Rand a year?
But you know what? That's fine. He's entitled to it. I don't mind. I don't begrudge him that. You take Brian Joffe at Bidvest. He came along with nothing. I mean, I knew him when he had nothing. He was studying to be
Can I just...
Sure, sorry. Yeah.
When you just said now he's entitled to it, I think the people of this country is also entitled to more, because it's their labor, and without the labor, he won't be on top. So I think you're thinking of it on a very micro level, but in a broader scheme of things, the people of the country is entitled to the wealth that we have. We have all the minerals in South Africa that they say we're one of the richest countries in the world, but yet it doesn't trickle down to the workers.
Yeah.
So I think we should put more emphasis on just making one guy rich, and because he has the influence and the money to invest and all that. Yeah. But we need to see the workers as they are the country, and not just the one guy on top. Yeah. They are actually more important than the one guy on top, if you know what I'm saying.
Nantle, I hear exactly what you're saying, but at the end of the day, the workers also wouldn't be working if they weren't happy. And I think he does pay well. So look, I've never worked for them, but people that I do know.
Doesn't pay well enough for them to qualify to pay income tax.
Well, again, I can't. Yeah,
but look, let's look at a different
let's
way.
not get too low on it. But I'm simply
way.
saying, if we get Brian Joffe's and we get the the Whitey Bassons of this world, they came from nowhere. They created work and created employment. Yes, they got very rich in the process, but. So what? At the end of the day, they've created employment, they've created jobs, and there's nothing stopping anybody else doing exactly what they're doing. They didn't get the job through family connections or whatever. So if I came along and I'd made a real success of my industry and worked extremely hard and taken lots of risks, I too would expect to be rewarded, but not at the expense of the staff. I would be paying market-related wages, better if possible, and make sure my staff are comfortable.
Yeah. So other dangers, if we continue this route of being the most unequal society in the world, Zimbabwe is the future. Society will implode. You'll reach a tipping point like in Tunisia or Egypt or other countries where society just, whatever small spark it is.
Yeah.
I mean, Tunisia is about a police officer harassing a fruit hawker.
Yeah.
Society will implode, and then everybody will be burnt because of it. So we can continue on a route where people live in Khayelitsha, earning so little money they can't afford a decent house, or people live in Manenberg where life is a living nightmare for people just to walk home because of crime, and then people live in Constantia. So that's something that business also needs to help to say, look, what can we do to pay people not just minimum wage but a living wage? People can afford to buy the goods that companies produce. People can afford to be feeling productive at the workplace, being productive, and have a more sustainable society. Because right now, what we're living right now is a ticking time bomb. It will explode one day if we don't begin to change things. So I'm not saying we must be unrealistic. We're not saying that, Whitey Basson must get paid a minimum wage. It's just
No, I realise that.
But those aunties who work as cashiers, the auntie
Yes.
from Tafelse who works at ShopRite, let's not take a ShopRite, works at a supermarket. For 20 years she's worked there. Never gets paid enough to even to qualify to pay income tax. So the state says you are paying so little. We don't want to take anything from you because you're already struggling to survive. And worse is that she's not even permanent.
And
She's permanently temporary on 3-month contracts, so she doesn't even have the security to tell herself, look, and next year I've got this job, the year after I've got the job. And so what often happens, the employer says, well, look, let's keep you permanently casual, so the minute we get tired of you, we'll offload you. And she knows that in a society with unemployment rate of 41%, she won't dare raise her voice because the alternative is unemployment. So I'll take this salary as poor as it is.
Well taken.
So I think the point is that we need to have a better conversation which says, let's look at the example, how did Sweden or Denmark, and I know it's apples to
that's
oranges,
because they're very wealthy in the sense.
but they didn't get to where they were overnight. They got where they were said, let's work as government, business, and labor. How can we compromise together? What does business need to survive and do well? What does workers need to survive and do well? And let's build a foundation for that. So that's what we are having engagement to say with government and business to say, what can we do to begin? It's not going to be overnight. To kind of nudge us in a bit of a better direction. So one thing we're looking at is say, okay, you have these companies who are listed in the stock market, people's pension funds are invested in it. Can companies in the annual reports to their shareholders disclose the wage gap of that company from the top earner to the bottom earner? We're not saying you need to pay people the same wage. There's no requirement what you must pay. But just to say, if you're comfortable with this, disclose it to your shareholders. Let's see if they're comfortable with it. Trying to build a bit of a better shareholder activism culture, because right now you find there's no shareholder activism. We invest our pension funds, we don't ask how they invested, etc. So trying to say, might be 50 years, 100 years behind Sweden, but let's try to say, let's build a foundation for a bit of a better society. Because ultimately we don't want to go that route of a Tunisia or Zimbabwe, because that doesn't benefit anybody.
I kind of get that, but then again, going back to the cashier example, we've had many cases where the cashiers have been promoted up through the ranks, and there's some really famous examples where some people have done exceptionally well and started as a cashier. Matter of fact, in my company, I started as a driver. So the people do have the ability, or rather they very often have the chance. Any company, and I can speak from experience, if I saw potential in any one of my staff, I would rather hire from my own staff before I went outside. Sadly, I wasn't always able to do that. So there is that one option. And the second option is, or the second point that I would make is that, look, I hear what the unions are trying to do, and the protection is all well and good. But at the end of the day, that person who's not happy is entitled to move on elsewhere. If they stay there for whatever reason, they haven't moved up in their job. Might be just because they're not very good at it. They can't. The difficulty in firing people is enormous. I mean, and again, I speak from real experience there. I spent a lot of time fighting, people that were claiming that they were unfairly dismissed and so on. I'm not totally convinced by that argument, and I go back to what I was saying earlier, is that surely that's the decision that the employee must make, and they are entitled to go elsewhere. You might say, well, hang on a second, there's nowhere else for them to go. But whose problem is that? That is the problem of the government, which was voted in by the majority of people. I just heard the other day that and I mean, this just came up in a podcast with that well-known economist whose name escapes me for the moment, Matthew. But do you know that last week alone, investors sold 400 million rand of shares in 1 week? He said that 135 billion rand have left the JSE in over a year. And the JSE has performed terribly. It's performed terribly because businesses are not performing. They're not creating profits. There's a little investment going back into the government. And I go back to my original question is, how are we going to get business going? And I just somehow feel that the unions are not getting on board in the sense that they are, when an entrepreneur comes along, make sure you do everything to keep that entrepreneur in business and allow people that can employ people, can't afford the minimum wage. There must be some sort of an exemption where you say, you know what, we need these baskets.
So there is an exemption in the Minimum Wage Act. There is an exemption.
There is an exemption.
Companies can apply for the exemption.
Yes, they can.
But there's a catch. You must generally prove.
Yeah.
So you must submit it. So don't just apply.
Yes.
Because everybody will apply.
Yes.
You have to submit your financial reports just to say, yes, indeed, I can't afford minimum wage.
Yes.
Here's an exemption.
Yes.
That can be done.
But not when you start your business.
No, you can do it.
You haven't even got a financial statement.
Yeah, but
You've got four people sitting
But then
in a
how
hut.
do you know you can? No, you can provide your bank statement, whatever financial evidence you got. It's a very broad term. You'll get the exemption if you indeed can provide it. About 2,000 companies applied. About half of them did get it. Those who didn't get it is largely because they didn't submit the documents, probably because they couldn't provide them. So you can get it.
Yeah.
But I think, again, we're not going to grow an economy by paying people slave wage, because if that is the case to economic success, then South Africa would have had 100% unemployment until 2019.
But then how long must we import these
That's what we need to say. What do we do to assist business? But paying people slave wage is not the success to grow an
It's
economy.
the only way you're going to do it, to compete with the
Because
Chinese.
South Africa today would then be the most prosperous industrial economy, because you've had unemployment being so high, not for 4 years since the minimum wage came into effect, or 5 years, but for decades.
Yes.
The apartheid regime created a society of cheap slave labor.
Yes.
We always had high unemployment.
Yes.
So the issues for us to grow the economy, which the unions are involved in heavily with government and business to try to resolve, fix ESCOM, because every company which can have reliable and affordable electricity can be productive. Fix the trains, transit, because that grows mining and manufacturing, agriculture, which is key. That's the backbone of the economy. So paying people slave wage is not going to make the mining companies
Let's
success.
move on. I hear what your point.
So
you've made a
the
good
other
point
thing
there.
is
There is an exemption. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry?
If you want to get companies to not just grow today, but to be sustainable, so we're making a huge mistake, because we're not skilling workers for the jobs of tomorrow. We have a huge amount of money in the CETA, the National Skills Fund, but the quality of courses provided, I can say politely, are a joke.
I agree with
So you take a company and they provide anger management courses for staff. Instead of saying, what are the skills that companies... I mean, it's amazing we say we have a shortage of long-distance truck drivers. Yet if queues of people unemployed in township who could easily be trained. It's a 3-month course to become a driver. And so we need to have a much better conversation between business and labor and government to say that we're not spoiled, we're not short of money. How can that money from the CETAs be used? And it's amazing. It's almost a crime, actually. It is a crime. There's some of these CETAs, we've got about 24 of them, don't spend money every year. One CETA alone didn't spend 600 million rand in a single financial year. Yet we've got queues of young people.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's the kind of productive conversation we need to have, to say, how do you do that? And not just for today's jobs.
I know how
but
you do that.
Automation, etc. The fourth industrial, because we can delay the fourth industrial revolution. That's fine. No problem. I mean, some sectors will do that, like the fuel court, the petrol stations have done it for years as a part of a comeback between business and labor, etc. But that's a delaying tactic. We need to say, what are we going to do to invest in skills for new sectors, like the coal industry, the e-platform workers, etc. Because if we don't do that, then everything else we're doing is ticking.
Can I just quickly challenge you on the services sector? First of all, I agree with what you say. But you asked, how can we correct that? The fact that they're sitting on all this money and the courses are a bit of a joke. Well, I was employed by the services sector for 8 years as a subject matter expert. And I was exposed to this. The sector I worked with was the services sector, which had the Estate Agency Affairs Board, laundry and dry cleaning, and quite a few. It was probably one of the biggest and, in fact, the best run. Unfortunately, what happened to that, and it's all documented there, is that on the case, on a transformation came along, the CEO identified a black guy who'd worked his way up from the post office as a unionist, showed great potential. He'd been training for 3 years to take over his job because he knew as a white person he was going to lose his job. The ANC came along and didn't like that guy. They wanted to put in their own man. They put him in, and within, I think, 3 years, that CETA, if you look at it today, it's a mess. It's a complete joke. And that is what happened, is that they took people that are totally unskilled, have no ability to run, and these are big budgets these CETAs are talking about, as you well know, and they just blew it. And today the CETAs are nothing more than a vehicle in which to steal money. That's all they've become. And anyway, but I want to move on to just something else, if I may.
But even on the CETAs...
Sorry.
No, I mean, I agree with you 100%.
I want you to have your final say. I don't want to come...
Look,
please have your
we mustn't also be like all doom and gloom. So yes, the CETAs are a disaster. We've been raising that point to the president, in fact, that there's a huge amount of money, but we're not using... And the people we should be asking what skills to provide our business, to say, I need these skills, here's the money. We should also be a bit more smart and say, maybe we should go to the technicons to say, look, can you provide, or the TVET colleges, can you provide these courses? At least you have a bit of control over corruption, wasteful expenditure, etc. But also my point was that, look, yes, we get irritated by government, and we should be, but there are also pockets of excellence too, like in the South African Revenue Service, where you can see, if you appoint right management in the last few years.
Indeed.
You
see,
invest in skills of staff.
Exactly.
You hire the kind of staff you need, etc. You can turn things around. Because, 5 years ago, under previous leadership of SARS, it was scary.
I want to so agree with you, Matthew. You see, you are exactly right. And SARS is a classic case because it does work well.
It can be done. It can be
that thing
fixed.
is a machine. And I tell you...
But 5 years ago, it was heading off the cliff.
And you know what they did at SARS? It's not a question of color. They just stopped putting in the cadres. They started putting in people. Yes, of course they were black, because there's millions of blacks can do the job, but they're not selected because they're not on the cadre list. And why SARS has become such a success is because somewhere down the line, the ANC government said, no. We want the best man for the job. Of course, he's a black guy, but that's great. I mean, because the black guys were the best, but not a cadre. And that's why I'm saying, why I'm agreeing with you so much. SARS is like a machine. And if you go into SARS, which I have done, because I fell short one day, it was interesting to see how, I thought to myself, wow, if we could be running Transnet or SAA or any of the SOEs.
You need to replicate that. Whew. So take the same principles of SARS, and that is relatively over the last 4 years. Replicate that at Home Affairs. So you don't have long queues or workers have to sacrifice a day's wages queuing for a birth certificate or ID. Replicate that across all other things. Look at some points it must be governed, like SARS must be run by government, it's fine. Some things might need to be a public-private partnership. Some things you might need to simply ask the private sector, can you assist with transferring these skills or building this infrastructure? It can be done. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom.
No, it doesn't. But there are so many black people that now live overseas because they can't get a job here. Or a colleague of mine who did a degree at University of Port Elizabeth, worked for a private company. And when I last spoke to him, he was in what was left of Grahamstown, trying to sort the roads out there. And I asked him why he hadn't joined the municipality of Port Elizabeth, because they're looking for a full-on road engineer. He said to me, Mike, that would be a death knell. He said, listen, I'm off. in our currently lives in Australia, and he's very happy there, and why would he not be? So we chased out a good guy because he knew ending up he'd be working for the ANC, he would have to fall in line with the other cadres, and he wouldn't last 5 minutes. But there's two more topics before we go on, and I'm really enjoying this conversation, Matthew, so thank you very much for your patience. I want to touch on MK because just you hear your feelings. It's such a big development in the political world. But I just want to touch on privatization. Now, as I say, I'm a rabid capitalist. I believe that private enterprise is the way to go in our country. I believe it's been proven 1,000,000 times over. I can quote you many examples, but probably the one that springs to mind most of all is Discovery Health. Now, I'm a member of Discovery Health. Matthew, it fascinates me how that computer program tracks me around the country. And if I buy some medicine, ding, it comes off. The system works. I've got a Discovery card, bank, ding, they can show me the money. And by the way, I'm 100 Rand short, they reminded me. So I've got to ship them 100 Rand before the day is out. Otherwise, I'll pay penalties. So fantastic what can be done. Yet the government, the ANC government, insists it's like life or death. Every single SOE is bankrupt. They refuse to relinquish control, even at the risk of those people losing their jobs. What is it about the ANC that is so hard set on this privatization? And they are losing grip. Like the post office is going to be privatized soon. And here's the funny thing, whether they like it or not, because they've just stuffed it up. So where do you stand as Cosatu? Are you guys going to stand with the ANC and insist that privatization remains a kind of like a partnership? Or are you going to allow privatization to take control of an entire SOE at their risk, not the taxpayers' risk, for a change? And if they lose money, they lose their money.
Yeah. Look, we need to have a broader debate because, the state has changed. What made sense in the 1950s may not necessarily make sense today. It made sense in the 1950s, 1980s for the state to run an airline because that was key to tourism, to domestic travel, etc. Private sector couldn't provide that capacity. You might ask yourself, does that still make sense today when the private sector can provide an airline quickly, overnight, no cost of state, cheaper, etc.? There's some sector of the economy which is critical for the state to be involved in completely, whether it's running a tax authority, whether it's running, roads, because that's just simply too expensive for the private sector to build. And if it does build, it becomes too expensive to consumers or the economy to manage. There's some parts where you need to have a partnership between the state and the private sector, and you can see that beginning to happen in certain sectors like electricity, because the state just struggles to have the money. And there's some sector of the economy which actually the state shouldn't get involved in. Just is not strategic. So we do need to have a broader discussion about what parts should the state be involved in, and also maybe what are the new models. There has been discussion about, we look at the Chinese models where some SOEs might be listed in the stock market. You could have a discussion. For example, the state now is a shareholder of Telkom, I think about 39% shareholder. So the different options, I think we need to have discussions. But also, what are the priorities for the state? So the state needs to prioritize. Education has to be a priority. And those are the things that the private sector just can't provide. So you make an interesting example about medical aids. And our medical aids are fantastic, world class, etc. But there's a problem. They're flipping expensive. So out of the medical aids we have, only about 14 or 15% of society can afford them. That's fine. So they get world class medical aid.
Yep.
Those who have medical aid, by April, if they've got kids, the day-to-day benefits are finished. The chronic payments or the co-payments they must pay bleed workers, our members who do have medical aid. What happened there is that many medical aid members delay necessary operations for next year or delay getting medication. So that creates a problem. We've seen many medical aid funds actually just go bankrupt because the hospitals charge so much that they then have to
they literally not
down for the bills.
The premiums are not enough to cover what, as you said.
And medical aid members just can't afford it. So that's a problem. So you find the private healthcare institutions are world class but underutilized. That's one issue. Pros and cons. Public healthcare, and they both have a similar budget, about 250 billion rand each, roughly. Public healthcare covers 84% of society who can't afford medical aids. But now the system is just overstretched. Vacancies, long queues, people queuing in the day hospital from 4 in the morning to get seen at 4 p.m. So Cape Town, for example, is the TB capital of the world. So we have this two contradictions. We need to find what is the fair balance. It's not going to be an overnight journey. And I think we'll need to have more discussions to find what's the right balance. And look, your NHI is not going to outlaw private healthcare providers. But there are going to be certain compromises where the state will say, look, what is a fair tariff regime, for example? It can't be that we tell somebody, well, if you want to live, you've got cancer, if you want to live, you need to pay R1 million. So the basic tell that worker, well, go die. So I'm not saying the states are right. In the states right now, people don't trust the state because they say, well, you can't manage a post office, you can't manage trains, you can't manage this.
Yeah.
So that we need to find out what's the right balance.
But here's the thing. Yes, I agree with what you're saying. What you're saying makes absolute sense to me up to a point. Here the thing is, in my humble opinion, I pay medical aid. I don't actually think it's that expensive for what I get, but I'm happy to pay it.
But you can afford to pay it.
Well, that's true. But then again, I'm 73 and I still work. And I work because I need to afford it. I had the experience of a government hospital once. And I said to my wife, if I have to work till I drop dead, I'm never going back to a government hospital. So that's where I work. And yes, but I think when I have tested the system, it's worked quite well. But be that as it may, you're right. I can afford it and I'm happy to pay it. But here's the thing. I'm also paying a fortune in tax. I've just paid...
Sure.
More thousands than I care to think about on a new motorcycle I bought. Now, if I thought for a second that money was going to go into healthcare and looking after the poor, that would be great. But it's not. We have got a healthcare system that people pay taxes for. This government has the money, but they are completely run into the ground. Whether you call it cadre deployment, whether you call it skinny jeans, whether you call it just total corruption, inefficiency, call it what you like. But we have private healthcare in this country already. We had it under apartheid and we have it now. But unfortunately, the system has collapsed. So the fact that the people voted in the ANC that have collapsed the health system is not anything I can do about. But what I can do is say, well, listen, I'm sure as hell not voting ANC again. I do not want to go to a government hospital ever. So I'm going to spend a lot of my hard-earned money making sure I don't. Those people that do go onto medical aid and halfway through the year run out of money, sure, then they go to the government hospitals. But the government is getting the money anyway. It should have the funds to take care of them. In fact, the government should be sending me a letter and saying, Mike from Newlands, thank you so much for going on to private healthcare. We really appreciate it. You're a wonderful South African and very patriotic, by the way, because your money that you're spending in tax will go to help somebody a lot poorer than yourself. But I don't get that letter. In fact, I get a whole lot of abuse. And in fact, now they want to take away any kind of refunds that I might get. And now they want to take it away completely. And they want to force me to go into a system that they can't run. And then I said to myself, well, hang on, let's give them a chance. So Dr. Motsoaledi identified 10 hospitals. They had to reach, certain standards. Every single hospital, Matthew, failed. But the ANC persevered, and they're still carrying on with NHI. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why I, who pay for private medical health care, should be forced to go to a government. I mean, so much so, if that does happen, I am going to go and chain myself to the railings of Parliament. So please bring me a sandwich when you go to work, because I promise you that is what I'm going to do, because the government is now taking away my right to health care, which I believe is the best for me. I do not want to go to a government-run health care or use a government train that doesn't make it to Joburg or PE or wherever it's supposed to be going, or I don't want any government service. In fact, the only service I use reluctantly is SARS, and boy, oh boy, is that service efficient. But that's my point. Does it not make sense, though? Is that not a fair argument, don't you think? Where am I going wrong with that argument?
No, there's nothing wrong with it. And look, so on the NHI, private healthcare providers will still be there. It just basically our government's going to have a database of public and private healthcare providers. Say, okay, you have this, go here, you have this, go there. But I agree with you. Look, right now there's a huge trust deficit in the state, anything the state does. And it's going to take time for the state to prove to society that...
Honestly tell me that you think the ANC government, which really, jokes aside, can't run a bath, is going to be able to do what Discovery does on a scale of 50 million people.
It's going to have to. It's going to have, not just on healthcare, across the state.
It's never going to happen.
No, it's going to have
it's
to.
Physically, it's
we don't
impossible.
have a choice. We don't have a choice.
But we do have a choice.
No,
we
don't have a
privatize.
choice. No, besides that, we don't have a choice as a society. There's some things you can't privatize. You can't privatize printing birth certificates. So the state is going to have to...
Maybe, yes.
Or show me a country which has done it. But anyway.
No, that's fine. You don't have to privatize that. That's a government function to administer.
But the point is, government's going to have to grow up and it's going to have to sort itself out. We can't continue as is. Because you can see that, 10 years ago, Home Affairs went through a drastic improvement. You wouldn't queue for more than 40 minutes. You'd get your passport within about 5 or 4 days, etc. It really went through massive overhaul. Go back to Home Affairs now. I mean, I went there last year for my daughter's passport and ID. We had to queue about, I think, 6 different days. I think we went to about 4 different branches. It's just a mess. So the point is, so you can't privatize some function of the state. So the point is, the state's got to get its act together. It's got to fix itself. Although society will dump the ANC, it just has to be there. And look, the fact is that SARS and there's other pockets of excellence in the state where you can see if you just appoint competent management, deal with the issue of corruption, invest in the IT capacity, invest in the staff, hire the staff, pay them well, etc., things can be turned around. So it can be done.
No,
Look, the point is,
it can.
It's got to be done.
It's got to be done, and I quite agree.
Otherwise, the future will be very bleak.
Indeed. And you know what annoys me most, just talking about that, is this cadre deployment thing and talking about
But it's not just, let's not always just pick on the ANC. Other parties have also messed up. The IFP hasn't covered itself in glory when it ran KZN. The pokey course of political parties who masquerade running Gauteng, some bizarre concoctions there. Al-Jama runs Joburg. They themselves. But look, there's a thing that I think we can all agree on, whether it's ANC or DA, or
I'm
IFP,
talking ANC
etc.
because they run the country,
But look, we can. Things can be done. Things can be improved. And look, they have to be improved. But look, society also mustn't pretend we're not part of the problem. So I went to Namibia for the holidays. The gravel roads better than our paved roads.
Yes.
Because they train the staff, they invest in machinery, etc. Come to the South African side of the border. You know what's struggling the most? Besides the fact that our dirt roads are a disaster, there's a beer bottle thrown every few hundred meters. Government didn't throw the beer bottle. ANC didn't throw it.
Correct.
DA didn't throw it. It's the individual who threw it.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
So who must clean a broken beer bottle?
Yeah.
Because that's going to puncture someone's tire.
Yeah.
So society must also take responsibility. Just like, when we beat our wives, we rape children. That's not government which does it. It's society. So there's something we all also have to do to say, can we not also improve things? People, you drive along the road, there's someone urinating on the side of the road. Why? Couldn't you go to a bathroom? Why must you make everything so dirty all the time? So I'm not saying the ANC mustn't be held accountable, because the ANC is messed up badly on many fronts. But I think also society, we can also do our own little bit. But you'll find people walking, on Clifton Road. They'll, have KFC and they'll throw the wrapper on the ground. And then that same person will complain later, say, but why is the city not keeping my streets clean?
But the thing is that they take their cue from our government. When you have 4 security guards leap out of a car and beat up 3 guys, what does that message send? It sends, you don't like the way they're driving, jump out the car and beat them up. We've got
in fact, those police officers themselves ask themselves, why did they do that?
But also, here's the other thing is, there's going to be no consequences. Those police officers will not lose their jobs. The same guy throws the bottle on the side of the road. He knows there's no consequences. He knows the police are not going to do anything about it.
So now if you look at the Chinese or the Singaporean example, there's consequences.
Of course.
You go to Singapore,
piece of bubble gum, and you're in jail.
So we need to start looking at those examples.
We do, but time is...
Even small, the New York broken window approach.
Yes.
Until you start fixing those things,
it
also means that us as parents, what values do we teach our children? Because that guy who throws a bottle,
Matthew,
that was someone's child. So someone didn't raise a child properly.
I think we both agree, there's no doubt about it, that things need to change and something needs to be done about it. I have to say, though, It's going to be the electorate that does that, because at the moment we are following the government. The government is setting the example. It cannot be that we have 200 black children that starve to death in this country every month. Every month. I have challenged so many people, and not one of them goes, wow, or shock, or horror. And then when I tell them we're sending 50 Rand to Cuba for their starving children, they think this is a good idea, because we've kind of morally just lost our way. We do throw stuff out the window. We beat people up. The government does not. 70 murders a day. It just rolls off, So
Sure.
we've just become like deadened to this whole thing.
I think we're going through our teenage years. We're doing a lot of stupid things.
Indeed.
The solutions are very
Well,
clear. And
my
we can
worry
do it.
is that we've almost run out of time. But we will see in the next election.
We
Will
can-
the people speak up?
Look, there is
I
progress.
just don't know.
If you look at
But-
leave aside elections, because the thing is across party, it's across society, and it involves all of us having just to fix it, irrespective of party. Electricity last year, January, was scary. 10 hours, 12 hours of load shedding. I'm not saying ESCOM is perfect, not saying ESCOM is out of the woods by a long shot, but we have seen progress. And I think it's providing a useful also alternative way forward for many issues to say how can a state, society as business, how can we contribute it? You can see a new model unfolding with the ESCOM, on the energy front rather, maybe that's a better way of calling it. So there's progress, but we need to replicate it, because you're right, we don't have luxury time, because like for example, transit is scary.
It's very scary.
But you can see there's efforts on all sides to say how we fix it.
My question,
a bit late, to put
I
it
agree with
politely.
you. I think way too late. And the fact of the matter is, I'm just talking personally. I don't believe a word the ANC government tells me anymore. Whether it's the Minister of Electricity, whoever it is, the spokesman from ESCOM, I honestly don't know what to believe.
But you can see the results in terms of like 12 hours versus 2 hours.
But I'm expecting it. The industry comes back next week, full time.
No,
I'm willing to bet we'll be on level 4. And we've been doing this for 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah, but I think you can see some progress. Look, you don't have a choice. So if you own a restaurant, you own a hotel or shopping center, you have two options. One is you go this route and you close, or you sort yourself out.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but a crisis can be a good thing if it forces society to fix something that is fundamentally broken.
Never waste a good crisis.
So
I want to move on quickly, and then we need to bring the show to an end. I have so enjoyed debating with you and discussing with you. I've had issues that have been burning in my soul for a long time, and so it's so nice that you to be here and listen to me, and I appreciate it. I want to just touch on something that our producer Nantel touched on, and it's so relevant because you're closer to the seat of power than all of us, or certainly us in the studio. Is where we're going in the next election. As you just mentioned, we've got a potpourri of heaven knows what else. We're going to have a voting sheet that's going to be like, I don't know how long. And that in itself is going to be chaotic. But certainly the main parties will be there, and I think they'll take the lion's share of the vote. But the hand grenade that has just been thrown in the tent of the 2024 election is the one tossed in there by our late ex-President Zuma. And he's now founded a party called MK, as we said earlier, we're so loyal, I love the ANC, I'll die ANC. But all of a sudden, he's publicly said he's voting for somewhere else. And I believe the party has grown to about 200,000 people. This is the figure I heard, and they apparently said they can prove this. That was a while back. That was about 2 days after he announced it. So, I take that with a pinch of salt. But be that as it may, Matthew, where do you see us going in the election? More of a personal view. I know, but the ANC. I don't actually, if I may just say this, I don't think the ANC is going to lose that badly. I think, strangely enough, with the massive amounts of money, 18,000 people on grants and all the people benefiting from child welfare and all those kind of good things, which the ANC has successfully sold as ANC money, not my money or your money, I think that's going to keep them very much in the rural areas in power. But in the metropoles, I see problems. And I particularly now see a problem for them with the MK, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. Where are we going?
So look, every election cycle, every Tom, Dick, and Harry and the cat and the dog forms a party. the IEC releases latest registration list of parties. There was about another 24 formed. It happens every election cycle. Many of them are by former ANC members like Zuma, so it's no different. In fact, many of the parties in parliament, all these smaller 1% parties, UDM, COPE, EFF, all came from the ANC, PAC, etc., etc. No, look, the MK party, to be honest with you, is a joke. Nobody can say who its leaders are. Does it have members? Does it have policy? Does it have a manifesto?
We don't even know their committee. Yes.
They actually were claiming, it's a scam run by Zuma and his daughter. They actually were claiming that on the first day they had 1 million members joined. The second day they said they got 2 million. Then they said they had 3 million. I think Zuma has fundamentally miscalculated badly to his own benefit, or disadvantage rather, because now he's spent banked all his political capital on this little party. Now what happens if they're likely to get 10,000 votes?
Wow.
Nothing. They won't get a seat in parliament.
That's chicken feed.
He'll be rendered politically as a joke. I think he made a big mistake. He's formed a party because he's aggrieved to the world because law enforcement, the state is not interfering in his defense on his many corruption trials. The state said, you are charged as an individual, sort yourself out, we're not paying for you anymore, which is the right thing the state has done. Good luck. So he's angry. Many former leaders of governments across the world have left office unhappy and they formed little political parties. It hasn't ended well for them.
No.
The ANC doesn't need to worry about that. The ANC needs to worry about getting ESCOM fixed so the economy can grow. It needs to worry about getting Transnet fixed urgently because that's the backbone of the economy, manufacturing, mining, agriculture, etc. It needs to reduce unemployment. It needs to show progress in dealing with corruption. If the ANC can do that, society will support it. If the ANC doesn't do that, well... But look, any party which has run a government for 30 years is going to irritate people. It's inevitable. Society across the world, they like change after every decade. I suspect, the ANC will get in the mid 40%, maybe 50%. It'll get most provinces, but I suspect you will definitely have a coalition, I suspect, in 2 provinces. Gauteng most likely, KZN maybe. So I suspect the ANC will get 45, 50. DA probably get about 25. I'm surprised the DA hasn't actually gone beyond 25. I think they peaked.
This is?
The DA.
The DA, yeah. I also agree with that.
I think they made some fundamental miscalculations.
They're claiming 30. I don't know.
Look, all parties will claim a bit of extra support. Yeah. All parties do get or the big parties rather, get a bit of a bump come election time. People decide whether they're going to vote. I suspect the DA will get in the mid-20s. The EFF probably get in the mid-teens. You'll get a scatterings of small little parties. It's fine. But, look, society's evolving. Coalitions, I think, are part of the landscape. I think it'll be useful if the political parties begin to see how can they work with each other. We've tried in our work at Parliament to say, look, fine, we support the ANC, it's fine, but can the DA support this bill? We've managed to get them to support some bills. We got a bill passed to tackle corruption in the Public Investment Corporation. That is a DA bill. They drafted in response to Cosatu positions. We got the ANC to support it. The paternity leave law we have now was actually drafted by the ACDP in response to a Cosatu submission. We went to tell the ANC, let's support it as part of growing societies, improving culture, blah, blah, blah. So I think that, 90% of issues parties should be able to find each other because, all parties should be opposed, we hope would be opposed to corruption or would we support growing the economy. But look, I think we're in a bit of a transitional phase, and so the electoral law has been amended for this year rather, to allow independents to contest. So if Mike Newlands wants to contest for National Parliament, he can do so. You'd have to get votes like any other party. Quite a few. Just like with local government. I think it might make the first elections a little bit messy, complicated, which is a little bit worrying because one of the benefits of our electoral system has been it's been so simple, everybody can understand it and accept the results. Now we start tinkering and making it more complicated. That might kind of weaken the credibility of it, which is a bit concerning, but nonetheless it's here as a constitutional court directive. We had some good discussions, all the political parties in Parliament last year and ourselves at UWC to say how to manage coalitions. Give them a bit more of a framework because right now they're chaotic. So you have Joburg, voting no confidence because one councillor is aggrieved because he didn't get a job. We do need to have a bit of a discussion and say, well, let's evolve our electoral laws because we need to guide things. Maybe we should have to say how often can you have votes of no confidence, what are the thresholds, etc. We also need maybe to reflect on some of the successes of the 1994 GNU approach where, if perhaps you can't form a coalition or majority party, maybe we have an automatic then after 90 days of a GNU approach which says, okay, Party X, you got 10%, you get therefore 10% of the seats in the cabinet or the provincial executive committee or the municipal committee. Because, you don't want a situation. We had in KZN a couple of times where the ANC and the IFP coalition kept kicking each other out of office, or Joburg. That's a recipe for chaos when we need to pave the roads.
Absolutely.
So maybe in those kind of
Absolutely.
scenarios, if a legislative authority can't fulfill its statutory obligations of electing leadership, passing budgets, then maybe, after 90 days, for example, you have a GNU approach. So you guys are idiots. We're now going to guide you. But look, I think we're going to go through a 10-year process of we're going to adjust our laws. Our laws have been good because you don't have a scenario like of Britain where, or some other countries, where party gets 35% of the vote, it gets 60% of the parliament, and it runs society. That's a bit perverse.
Yeah.
But we might have to tinker our system to see what makes sense of the South African scenario. But right now, what is the chaos in Joburg? We have half a dozen mayors in 5 years, or of Nelson Mandela Bay, where no one knows who the mayor is because they keep changing. That's not a formula we should be seeking to keep. We should say, let's
a book,
adjust it a bit.
I'm not sure it's in my collection here, it's called How to Steal a City. It's about Port Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Is it right there?
Oliver.
And in this book, there it is, Crispin Oliver, I recommend a read to any of my viewers. This is a great book. But in this book, he makes mention of the fact, and I think it's worth repeating, and that is that the trouble with the councils and municipalities, and you're talking particularly about Joburg, is the fact that they're all staffed by cadres. So when the DA comes in and takes over, or a coalition takes over from the ANC, the very people that are writing out the orders and are running the municipality, the actual paid employees, not political employees, they are now doing whatever they can to disrupt the new people in power.
The UDM mayor of PE, of Nelson Mandela Bay, he was found wanting. He wasn't a cadre, he was UDM. So the
and
guys
this
in
is a
Joburg,
problem that needs to be overcome as well.
The opposition parties brought their own little friends and families with. So
I've got one final question.
the point
for
is
you then,
to strengthen the systems. That's
sorry.
how you deal with the issue of corruption, to strengthen systems.
Is to strengthen?
Strengthen the systems.
Strengthen the system.
Professionalize it, strengthen it.
Well, I think that, but I think there's got to be consequences. I think until such time in this country we can have all the I think we can strengthen the system. But if the president stuffs money in his chair and he's caught on breaking the law, he should go to jail. If we can't put one ANC in jail after the Zondo Commission and R1 billion later, we toast, as quite frankly. We can strengthen till the cows come home.
Sure.
But Matthew, with respect, I think we're actually screwed, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And we're never going to win this battle, because it's just unacceptable that there is, and we've got an NPA which really is just
This week.
It's just an absolute
There has been
joke.
some people going to jail, but I agree with you, it's not enough. I mean, you have, like, for example, the Premier of the Northern Cape. He spent the last, I think, 7 years in prison for
Look,
corruption.
we had old Block in jail. But I mean, it's William Kesey. Where is he? He's still enjoying
We need to
life.
get many more.
And then the guys that do go to jail are like old buggerlugs who was dying. He had 10 days to live. What happened to him? He's still alive.
But
What's
look, to
his
be
name,
fair
old?
to Sheikh.
Sheikh.
But look, also, let's give credit to South Africa at times as too. I know it's not easy, but there's good news and bad news. South Africa sent a former police commissioner to prison, Jackie Celebi.
Yeah, it won't happen again, though. I agree with you.
Yeah,
starting with Jackie Celebi.
That is good. The fact is that we, compared us to other African countries, I'm just trying to balance the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Former President Mbeki was told by his party, it's time to go. He said, fine. Wrongly that they told him to go. No bloodshed. He just said, let me call a press conference. I'm gone by tomorrow. Zoom with all of his drama, he left. Kicking and screaming, fine. But he left. No one died. So that's a good thing. But I'm not saying that the problems are there. The problems are there and they're scary. But the seeds for us to grow and to fix things, they're there. We can do it.
We've got Becky Cele, who's our Minister of Police. He was dismissed for corruption by Zuma. We go back to this,
Sure.
people throwing glasses and bottles on the side of the road. Well, they look at that thing, hang on a second, this guy was caught stealing, it was a 1.6 billion rand scheme with a guy called Roo. Where is he today as the Minister of Police? We reward corruption here. We don't send people to jail. That's what's got to change. And I'm hoping, in my humble opinion, it's not going to happen as much as we like, but I'm hoping something will happen in the next election.
But also, we don't need to wait for an election to change our behavior. There's no need for anybody to ever throw a bottle on the street.
But the people are only going to change their behavior when the people above them who lead by example, if they stop throwing a bottle in the street, or better still,
but Mike,
if they get locked up.
You don't throw bottles in the street.
No, I don't.
You don't depend upon an election result to tell you.
But if I did throw a bottle in the street, I know full well nobody's going to arrest me. And if I did get arrested, I could buy myself out of jail. And that's the trouble.
If everybody throws a bottle in the street, there's no amount of state efficiency which can address the situation.
But
so my point is, society must also play its role. Because the state can never be that efficient. Well, they're accepted like a Singapore and China. But we can't have a policeman in every single street to stop us. So society, too, also needs to play its role. So just like, for example, let's go back to our favorite example of success, SARS.
You're extending my interview, and I've got no complaints, so please go ahead. I hope, Nantel, is that okay? We way over the deadline now, but please carry on, Matthew, because I'm so enjoying your views, and so carry on.
To your point, so SARS is sort of making an example of other wealthy who dodge taxes, to send a broader message to society that, hey, we're dealing with these guys, so you need to fall in line, which is right. But also, that it's I think, but everybody must play their part. So, if we all tinker with the system of SARS, well, then society is going to collapse. So, I guess your point is right. Make an example of a few idiots, high-profile idiots.
Yeah,
it will change the thing.
Yeah, we've got to see people going to jail.
That's what we've been frustrated with the NPA. That it's great to charge a former mayor of eThekwini, high profile, but can you actually get it to trial?
No,
because
you can't.
So the ANC's credit, she was removed, kicking and screaming as mayor. That's great. But now the NPA messes it up by not getting it to trial.
And why does the NPA mess it up? Because we choose the wrong people for the job. Why do we choose the wrong people for the job? Because at the end of the day, the ANC doesn't want the mayor to go to jail. Well, they are protecting themselves. If otherwise, they would have had...
I think partly the courts are so inefficient. The fact that on average, all cases take about 2 years from their first appearance to the 12th appearance, that's a broken system. We need to overhaul it.
Yeah. No, look,
but also to resource it properly too.
Yeah, sure. No,
also to invest in
I
systems.
Take your point. I want to ask you one more quick question now, since we're on a roll, Matthew. You talked about our election and the election coming up. Just quickly, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and we're going to really have to wrap it up. But I'm interested in your views. The Van Zyl Summit report came out some 15, 20 years ago, and in the report, it suggested quite strongly, and I thought argued very strongly, for the fact that we should move back to the constituency system. That is the system where you live in a constituency and you vote for the person that stands as the ward member of parliament, and then you have, say, different parties. You vote, the one that wins goes to parliament, and if there's enough of them, they form a cabinet. And that's how we had it in the old apartheid days. I'm not suggesting, and I loved apartheid, I've got to make all the usual disclaimers because I didn't, but it was a very good system. It's currently the British system. And it's a system that gave the people control. At the moment now, we are issued with an MP in our area. I can't tell you, well, actually, I can tell you who mine is, but then again, obviously, I'm politically aware than most. But 99% people haven't got a clue who my MP is, and if they didn't like what he was doing, they couldn't deal with him. With the Van Zyl Summit system, or with the English Westminster system, let's call it, there you can get rid of your MP if he doesn't perform, if he doesn't do what he's told to do and doesn't carry out what his promises. The current system, we can't. Would you support we change the system and we go to the Westminster system?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. So let's say there are pros and cons to both systems. So, the constituency system is what we have in our wards right now. And I can guarantee you 99% of South Africans have no idea who the ward council is. And the fact that we have rubbish in our streets, we've got potholes in our streets, got stormwater drainage overflowing because the people dump the rubbish there. That's the problem of ward council not doing his job, her job. So we have ward council right now, not working. So that's one issue. Look at the issue of Britain. A party which gets 30% of the vote runs government. Look at the US. the US system, most people would say, is broken. Yet you have about 90% of constituencies are gerrymandered in the US by the political party, whether Democrats or Republicans, to suit them. And it's physically, almost politically impossible for the other party to win it because they've cooked the boundaries so badly that no matter what you do, a Republican is going to win this seat or a Democrat is going to win this seat. So I'd be very wary if we brought that kind of chaos to here. Then we said the pros of our system, why the PR system was chosen in 94 is that one was that we wanted every single vote to be recognized and to be counted. So to win a seat in the National Assembly, you must get 0.25% of a vote. You'll get a seat in Parliament. That was critical in 94 because if you didn't have it, if you had simply a constituency system, the ANC, the then National Party, or the DA now, the IFP, and now the EFF, they'll be the only parties in Parliament. So that could be good if you wanted to kind of avoid the chaos of like Joburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, fine. What it would have meant in 94 is that you would not have had the Freedom Front Plus, for example, in Parliament. They wouldn't have won a seat, or maybe they would have won one seat, maybe. The danger at that time, why it was chosen is that you wanted the voice of the Freedom Front Plus, you wanted the voice of the PAC, you wanted the voice of the IFP, all in Parliament. You didn't want anybody outside. Remember in 94 we had bombings taking place in Worcester at Jan Smuts Airport by Afrikaner right-wing extremists who didn't feel part of the system. So you needed people to be part of it. But look, I think the reality is we are going to go to some sort of a hybrid constituency PR system like we have local government, which is not a bad compromise. Leave aside our silly little sleepy ward councils who nobody knows what they're doing. So right now in the local government, you probably have a model for future where you can elect in your ward in Claremont or Grassy Park, Council X, have some sort of theoretical control over them. Reality is not always that way. But at the same time, you also have a PR system where overall the amount of councils in a municipality must reflect the PR vote. So it includes the ward and the PR. The one danger which is there, so the nice thing with the PR system right now is that the Parliament reflects the demographic diversity of South Africa. You have black, white, coloured, Indian, women, etc., people with disabilities, young, what. If you go for the purely PR, the constituent system, so look at right now at the ward councillors in Cape Town. Ward councillors overwhelmingly are men, overwhelmingly. It also means the DA has white and coloured male councillors. The ANC is African. If you take it to national, the IP will come with some African men. You would lose out the demographic diversity, you would lose out the gender diversity, etc. So we need to be wary of thinking that the grass is green on the other side because it's not always green on the other side. But I think what we're going through right now is a decade where the electoral law is going to be adjusted from time to time. So now this year, independents can stand for national, provincial, parliament legislatures. We took a minimalist approach as Cosatu in Parliament to say, let's tinker with the thing now. Let's see how it works. We're going to have to adjust it again in the next elections and probably in the next elections. I think we might have to take some parts of the British system because one good thing about it is that it creates a majority party when society just can't form a majority party. So the Labour Party in Britain will get 50% plus of the seats with 35% of the vote, or the Conservatives. Same thing in Canada, etc. So it creates a majority system where you need stability. Because right now the Gauteng chaos shows you why we need to. So I'm not saying I have all the answers. Maybe I was being a bit extreme to say no, or provocative rather. I think it's too early to say. I think that's why we said we're going to have to adjust it maybe 2 or 3, 4 times over the next decade or so. Because if, for example, we're going to have if the ANC can't get a majority, then I don't think we'd want to see this coalition chaos. They might want to say in 5 years' time, okay, how can we adjust it slightly to kind of create stability? Because you don't want a scenario. Imagine if you had a presidential inauguration every month.
Yeah, no.
On Al Jamaa president. That'd be chaos. So then you might want to tweak it slightly. But look, that's something I think we mustn't also discard the 1994 GNU formula.
Yeah.
Maybe there are elements of that we want to replicate.
Okay.
So I think the next decade, I think we're going to have to adjust it quite a few times. But I guess my long-winded point was that let's not assume the other one is perfect. Let's take the elements of positive of both sides
and try and make
pickpocket.
Works on both sides. Yeah, I think just in conclusion, I hear exactly what you're saying. But my frustration is, and I think a frustration of a lot of people is that we feel quite helpless. We vote DA or we vote EFF or whatever it is, ANC. And that's it. We have no input after that. I don't know if
Sure.
anybody's tried to write to their MP. The MP doesn't give a damn about you. They don't even write back because they're not reporting to you. They're reporting to the person who put them in the
Same thing
seat.
with the ward councillor.
No, I hear that.
who
But the
elects.
ward councillor must also know he's going to lose his job. So if the ward councillor doesn't perform, he will lose his job in most cases.
Not
But
always.
an MP, at the moment, my experience has been I write, and I'm not talking about the DA MPs, frankly, but the rest of the MPs, you write to them, their loyalty lies with the ANC because the ANC put them in that seat in Parliament earning millions.
In fact, that's
and
a
they are
different issue
not
there.
going to do anything that is going to upset their boss. You can,
There's a
quite
different
frankly,
issue
die
there.
in the hospital around the
It's
corner.
about the quality of MPs we elect too, that the party
But
deploys.
that's another frustration we
Because-
the electorate have. We have no control over these
No,
idiots.
besides that, my point is that the political parties need to invest in better quality deployees. Because I can say, 2004, 2009, the quality members of parliament individually. You had a Carter Asmal chair in the defense committee. You had a Tandi Modise also chair the defense.
Yeah.
Now look at some of the rocket scientists we have nowadays.
Yeah.
Guys who don't bother to read the stuff. They don't have.
Don't understand.
So
don't
my
pitch.
point is, political parties themselves need to deploy people, stronger quality people too.
But Matthew, that's entirely my point. You see,
Because
if
your
you
ward
take
councillors, if you go to the City of Cape Town on council meeting day,
yes,
you will see guys opening the agenda for the first time. They're still wrapped
fine.
in the plastic. Those are ward
that's fine.
councillors.
But that's fine. But at some stage, others, the party that he belongs to will have to deal with him because he will bring the party down and the party will lose. But just
Sure.
reflecting mainly on the big issues, if you talk about constituencies, the constituents, people put themselves up for election, either independently or with a political party. The DA says, okay, you look like the kind of guy that will represent us. These are our policies. Do you agree with them? Yes. And he puts himself for election. We have 3 people. We go to town hall meetings, which we used to have in the old days, where you could ask questions at the hall. Nowadays, you can't
an
do that
interesting
because
thing
it
the
doesn't
ANC
exist.
The ANC has done now for the selection of his candidates. They've actually taken a bit of a leaf from the DA candidate process. So the DA would have people advert. You must apply to be a DA public rep. They'll interview you.
It doesn't matter though. People still have no choice. All the DA is doing is operating within the system that they're given to
but the
operate
point
in.
is the quality of the public reps the DA often has of good quality. They
No,
get
they do.
They get
They
a
do.
skills,
But-
a variety of
yeah,
skills.
yeah.
So the ANC now, which
Yeah,
is good, is
yeah,
now
yeah.
saying, but look, the DA is getting better quality public reps, irrespective of the electoral system, better
Yeah.
quality individually.
Yeah.
What can we do to copy this? So that's been a positive
But
thing.
that's also getting them into trouble because now they're being forced to play race politics. Very often they go, oh, the best guy for the job's a white guy. Oh, we can't put him in. No, we have to find somebody of color. But the person of color is not the guy you want. He's not the best man for the job. Or vice versa, by the way, because they're trying to hit the quota thing, which the ANC loves to sit. But I still go back to my point. Not that I want to have the last word on my show, but I still say we are missing a trick here because the people of South Africa, one of the big reasons they are so disillusioned with Parliament is the fact that they have no control. That MP sits in Parliament, whether he's the MP for DA or EFF, sits there at the pleasure of that political party. And if I don't like my MP for the DA in my ward, I can do absolutely nothing about it. And that is a problem that I think Van Zyl in his book and his report, which regrettably I knew was going to gather dust because it doesn't suit the ANC to go that route because they will then lose complete control. But anyway, listen, I'm also going off on a tangent now, but I'm going to let you have the last say.
Look, I think with the point is we must find the best of both systems because I'm not convinced the other system is perfect. We have that in local government. And in fact, local governments are where we're weakest. Quality of our guys is abysmal, irrespective of political
Shocking.
party. If you go to Hanover Park,
No, it's shocking.
the levels of dumping there,
Yeah.
it's beyond belief. And you ask yourself, so where exactly is a ward council? Because Hanover Park is a relatively small ward geographically. Lavender Hill is the same scenario.
Yeah.
Kailicha, and you just think to yourself, so where exactly is the ward councillor who every day is paid a decent salary in a metro?
Yeah.
Not a fortune, but it's a decent
Adequate.
salary. He
Yeah.
volunteered for the job, what she did.
Exactly.
Go to Manenberg, same thing. So I think, we need to look at one option. You can be.
Bonteville, I remember also McKinsey. from Bonteville. Yeah, he complained that the guys are dumping. And my thing was like, why don't you just add a route or another day for people to come fetch because clearly that is what the people on the ground needs.
Sometimes there's also just companies who just, or idiots, look, there's a society-wide problem too. I mean, some idiot dumped a bunch of dirty nappies outside my house the other day.
Yeah,
there's no need for her to do it or them to do it because the city has provided rubbish bins which are cleaned within one block. But
yeah.
But look, I mean, I think we will adjust the system. We just need to see what works, doesn't work, tweak it. I can't see us not having some sort of significant constitutional system in the next 10 years.
I hope so.
Because I suspect
we need change.
The ANC is not going to get majorities much longer.
No.
Maybe this elections, but beyond that. So then I think then the political need will be to avoid the Gauteng chaos at national of presidential inaugurations every month.
Because, boy, that's reflecting badly on Joburg. Yeah.
So, look, I mean, how will a mayor do his job if he's been changed every 3 months?
Yeah, sure.
It's a joke, or Nelson Mandela.
I agree.
So I suspect then political necessity will say, look, what do we do? And you can combine the good things of PR system with that, but it won't be a magic wand. But yeah, it goes back to your point of law enforcement, etc.
I take your point 100%. I can't say I agree with it, but we both agree with each other. It would be boring if we all agreed. But Nantel, have you got any questions at all before I wrap up? Nothing striking. Okay. All right, then I'm just going to make my concluding marks, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for watching the Mike from Newlands show. I really just want to say a special thanks to Matthew Parks, because I'm not going to lie to you. I send out a lot of invitations to a lot of people. The EFF, perhaps the DA is the exception. I hate to say that, sounds like I'm giving the benefit, but the DA always comes back to me. But the rest of the political parties do not even give me the courtesy of a reply. So I really want to thank and acknowledge Cosatu, because they are obviously not scared to put people in jobs that are prepared to come online or come on camera and come into the studio and argue their points, because that's what they are here to do, and they're not embarrassed and they're not shy to do that, and they feel what they are doing is the right point or the right way to go about it, and I fully respect that. And that's the kind of debate that we need in this country. And as I said earlier in my introduction, it's what's going to help keep our media free and fair, and also allow platforms like the Cape Conscious Media to continue to bring you these shows. So I want to thanks very much, and perhaps in my concluding remarks, after thanking once again Matthew Parks for coming through and to Cosatu, we are in the Republic of no consequences. We touched on that earlier, and that's kind of where I feel at the moment. And in the words of my favorite podcaster, the citizen concerned would say, stay safe and beware of the comrades. Thank you.